section A, we looked at how to psychologically approach work. And in section B, we looked at what work to do. Now we have to look at how to do the work. Let's look at some ways of working which will boost your productivity. We will then use these principles in a more practical way in the later modules. Don't use your head as a storage place for all the things you've got to do and all the things you've got to remember. Capture your thoughts, planning notes, ideas, tasks, capture all of it onto paper or electronically. This frees up your mind to focus on one thing at a time, and it makes you more creative and more relaxed. I'm going to cover a comprehensive system in Module 2. Remember the perspective, I have to do everything, but there's never enough time to do everything. Well, actually, you shouldn't even try to do everything because it can lower your productivity. You need to cull the bottom 20 to 30% of your to-do list. And in Module 2, I'm going to help you do this. Use the 80-20 rule where you can. So focus on doing the tasks, the 20% of tasks, which generate the most value. I want to introduce you to Parkinson's law. Work expands so as to fill up the time available for its completion. This is very insidious. Whatever time you allocate to a task, the task will expand to take up all of that time. So if someone asks you to do the task by Friday, guess what? It will probably take you until Friday to do it. But if you are asked to do the task by Wednesday, guess what? You'll probably do the task by Wednesday. Imagine work is like expanding foam. Whatever space or container you make for that work, the work will always expand to take up the whole container. As an example, there was a university professor who noticed that people who had families finished their PhDs quicker than those who didn't have families. The reason was that those people with families had a limited amount of time, so had no choice but to cram the work in and work efficiently. The single people had all the time in the world, so they spent much longer completing their PhDs. There are two main consequences of Parkinson's law. Firstly, tasks take longer than they need to. To overcome this, set arbitrary deadlines to every task. Otherwise, you'll always be working longer hours than you need to. It's just our psychology. Always to set deadlines. Secondly, Parkinson's law means we will stay later in the office. If you've got no rough deadline as to when you want to leave the office, you always know that you've got the rest of the evening to finish the work off. Your subconscious takes over and makes tasks take longer. And this eats into your personal life. I've noticed that people who have a busy social life or who have families tend to leave the office earlier than those who don't. Another example of this was a study carried out in the US where they took two equivalent departments and one was told that it would finish at 5 p.m. and another department was told it would finish at 6 p.m. They measured the output after 3 months and guess what? They found no difference in output. We're going to solve Parkinson's law in a practical way in Module 2. Now, let me set you a challenge. Here is a glass container, and here are some rocks, and here is some gravel. Now imagine you had to fit all of these rocks and all of this gravel into this jar. Now the rocks and gravel only just fit into this jar. How would you do it? How would you make sure that you could do it first time? Pause the video now and think about the best way of solving this problem. How did you get on? Any ideas? Imagine that the rocks represent large, bulky pieces of work, items of work which are high value. And the gravel represents small bitty tasks. Now most of us come into work in the morning and start on the small bitty tasks first. We start on the gravel first. But look what happens if we pour all the gravel into the jar first. Then, when we try and fit the rocks inside, they don't fit. But if we start again, look what happens when we put the rocks in first. So we're putting the big bulky items in first, the high value items, like this. And then we find that when we pour the gravel in, bits of emails, phone calls that we're making, we find that the gravel easily fits all around all the rocks. And we fitted everything into the jar, and the jar can close, like that. So there are two principles here. The first principle is to do the big, important, high-value things first. Your subconscious will try and persuade you to do the small, easy things first to get them out of the way. But then you spend a lot longer doing the gravel than you need to, because you know you've got the rest of the day to do the rocks. Do you see? As the jar shows, the gravel will easily fit around the rocks, so do the big things first. In the mornings, of course. Author Brian Tracy calls this "eat that frog." Do the thing that you least want to do first thing in the morning. The second principle here is plan. Don't just jump in. If people do the rocks and gravel exercise and jump straight into it, they often make a mistake. They put the gravel in first, or some gravel in first, and then the rocks don't fit in. Then they have to empty the jar and try again. Now, unfortunately, life doesn't give us a second chance. Make sure that you plan a rough structure to the day before it starts, even if it's going to change. But psychologically, we don't like to plan. In Module 2, I will go through the psychology of planning and why it's so important. I will also show you a powerful planning tool called the 5-Minute Manager, which is guaranteed to save you at least 1 to 2 hours a day. How great would that be?